Hey guys, today I did a long form interview with SeeEl, a professional League of Legends coach. We have history together. He coached me in 2021 when I was playing on Direwolves and I was still competing full time professionally. He coached Rogue last year and is working with Team Heretics this year, and he had a lot of success in the LEC. Rogue won LEC in 2022, and he's just a very passionate and inspiring individual. Now, I do want to preface this video. We had some audio issues. My mic was a lot louder than his. I really do apologize for that, but most of the time he is doing the talking, so I hope that you can make that work on your end. Great. So we've got SeeEl on today, and I've been wanting to do this talk with you for a while, Chris, and it's great to finally have you here. Could you just give us a little bit of an intro for yourself, what you do, and a bit of your background as well? I know you've got a pretty unique background.
Yeah, so my name is Chris SeeEl. That's kind of what I go by. A lot of people just call me SeeEl. That's completely fine. I'm a full-time esports coach working in League of Legends, and I'm working in Europe at the moment under Team Heretics. Last year, we won a championship. Well, I won a championship with Rogue, who is now known as Koi. And before that, I was also Andy's coach for a few months during his stint at the Direwolves. So yeah, that's kind of like a brief background. But I've also coached, in 3 different regions in North America, Europe, and Oceania.
Yep.
Worked in the French League and the LEC, as well as the LCO and NA Academy. So that's just roughly my background. And before esports, I was a finance economics major, where I interned in a fintech company. But I also have like a plethora of experience, working as a GM for the Chiefs, for example, in 2020, as well as, running my own startup and working on multiple different ventures.
Yeah, so that's something that I've noticed from you. It's like you have quite a different background towards coaching than the typical coach. So a lot of coaches, they go through like the pro player pipeline, and then they start to retire, and then they enter into the management or the coaching stuff. And you, on the other hand, it seems like you were really motivated to just go straight into the coaching, and you have a lot of structures that we're going to hopefully get a peek at moving forwards. But what is your take on that in terms of like just going straight into the coaching and not having that pro background?
Yeah, so my take is, I think I've said this to you, a year and a half back. My take is that in 10 years or so, 95% or over 95% of the ecosystem, the coaching ecosystem, is going to be replaced by professionals, like ex-professional players. It's really, really hard to make it in the industry as a non-ex-pro because, first of all, you just lack the game knowledge that I would say a lot of the professionals have, not just from a general macro perspective, but from a field perspective on how to coach team fights or how to break down in the moment decision making, and how to kind of empathize at a higher level to players by being a pro player yourself, right? So there's so many advantages to being a pro or an ex-pro, and then there's obviously the huge one, which is you get to experience a lot of coaches while you're a professional player. So you get to choose what works and what doesn't, and what you think is good and what you don't think is good. And I think that's kind of what you've been doing as well, Cupcake. I had a lot of people reach out to me, actually, Andy, that was a part of your school of support. And they were saying that you were, building a lot of systems and kind of like implementing that. So that's what works for you. So, that's just my thought on being a professional coach without a professional player background. It's really, really, really hard, and you need to have some sort of edge or niche. And so, yeah, I would say that my case is quite rare and unique.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's much harder journey for sure. I would say.
Sure.
And every day you kind of also realize as a professional coach how much you're missing by not having that professional playing experience. So you have to work that extra hard just to keep up.
Right. And also getting like exposed, like when you're playing pro, you get exposed to so many perspectives from your teammates as well, right? That you can kind of integrate into a cohesive view of the game. So you must have studied a lot about the game, right? I know that you have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, for sure, but it's also about like ego and pride. If you have good players around you, you can learn a lot faster. That's what I've noticed. Just, to the people that may have said things that may have disagreed with you in the past, like being able to go to them and like learn from them is an integral part of the journey as well, I think.
Sure.
And that's why even amongst the pro players, although I do say that 99% or 95% of the coach population will be replaced by ex-pros, I also believe that 95% is a specific type of player. They need to be a specific type of player that excels at bringing people together, that excels at learning new skills and kind of understanding other people's perspectives. And from what I noticed with you, Andy, was that not only did you play a leader in your teams in the past, you were also an athlete, which is a huge advantage. You were a professional tennis player, right? Or not professional, but you were a very high level tennis player. So, having that exposure gives you a huge edge in terms of becoming a coach. And so, yeah, for me, I didn't have any of that, like none of that. So yeah, it was just stubbornness, I guess. For me. That's kind of what it came down to for me.
Yeah. No, I think our different backgrounds kind of, mesh pretty well. You have that, you had a heavily structured systems approach that, honestly, this was one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you so badly, is because of the inspiration that you gave me from our time together in 2021. And you mentioned that I have brought some structures from my school support my coaching program, and my whole approach to the game was like heavily inspired off of our time together. And so you had such a methodical approach to the game, and I was kind of in shock. I didn't realize that you can actually do that in the game. I was a lot about like feel and confidence and like being a Chad and just kind of going with the flow. And then you started talking about waves, like wave 2, wave 3, crash into bounce. I'm like, what are you talking about? Shouldn't I just like try and kill them, And so it was crazy how far that I was able to, just snowball that, the structure that you applied. And I've just kind of gone with that and run with it. And it's also been like a big part of my coaching journey is if you want to explain something, it's a skill in and of itself, and you also need to really understand it to the tiny details of exactly why you're doing something. It's not good enough to just come from professional play and say, oh, just do this. I think it feels right. That's not really good enough. But yeah, that was a big part in driving me towards like a really systematic approach. And my typical experience with coaches before you, they're either like good at one thing or the other thing. They're either really good at the analytical side and the drafting side, or they're good at the out of game and creating an environment. But when you applied that methodical approach, I was really impressed, and I knew that you were going to have a lot of success in your career. So that was really cool. And is that something that you feel like leads up to your success at the moment as well? How you approach your coaching with systems?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I stole the systems thing.
Okay.
When I first started my esports journey, I actually studied this industry to find a niche for what I would have, like to find a niche for when I graduated university. So I finished my internship at a fintech company called sprinklebit.com. They'd recently raised 10 plus million, and I think they were based in Sweden and then eventually Wall Street. And I was like, hey, when I graduate, I'm not a big academic. I want to do something. I want to make something. So I studied esports, looked at managerial stuff, looked at coaching, and something I noticed was, there was a big lack in infrastructure and a big gap in what would be easily perceived by someone outside of esports that worked in any other like sports, right? So I was like, wow, everyone's so bad. So I'm going to give it a go. So I just jumped in, knowing nothing, just studied the game however I could. And then in my first year of playing or coaching professionally, I coached the Chiefs Esports Club in 2020. There was this guy called Jensen Go, and I'm sure you know him. He was from Singapore, and he just came in, coached Legacy Esports, and they spanked us 2 times in a row. And I just heard the way this guy talked, and then I realized like something clicked in me. And not only did I think I could do way better than what he was doing, I realized that this was the key that I was missing in my coaching game and what I needed to study. So from there on, I built things out. And luckily for me, one of the initial steps I took throughout my coaching journey was to study the academic side of efficient learning paradigms, environments, and how other industries learn effectively, from gamification to compartmentalized learning. And that's also part of like what we're doing at Parable, my startup company. And so from there, I kind of developed that systems approach, and I realized I could build it for everything. And when you took such a methodical, like organized approach, you could encompass all areas of the industry, or all areas of the game, right? From macro to micro. So that's kind of actually where it started. Not a genius, but I do believe that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So you just take what you think is good. And that's kind of like the main approach that I've been taking throughout my career, just learning what I can and just making it my own and making it better. That's kind of how I started, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he didn't invent the systems either, right? I'm sure he was inspired by something else. So it's all about like integrating that into your own approach. So I wanted to quickly talk about your success last year and this year as well. So you've gone from Oceania, obviously a minor region, not very competitive on the international scale. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but you went to the NA Challenger League, and then the ERL, and then eventually the LEC, where you are coaching at the moment. So what do you think allowed you to just accelerate your progress so quickly, and what led to the success that you found in the LEC as well?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just having the right people around me. I had that initial, eureka moment by listening to some of Jensen Go's interviews, and I made it my own, right? But that opportunity, or that instance, kind of gave me an opportunity to go to North America to begin with. So when I ended up being able to speak to Inero, who was the head coach of Golden Guardians at the time, he saw potential in me. And I still think he's actually a great coach, despite the results and everything around that organization. And he filled in some of the knowledge gaps that I was missing, that he was implementing in his teams. And so I went there, and basically the entire journey was accelerated because I was, I think, faster than anybody at admitting my mistakes, by dropping all pride and just focusing on improving my craft. And obviously, that deep hunger and desire to be the best helps, right? I wouldn't say that this is my life calling at all, this whole esports journey. Unlike a lot of people, I have a lot of different interests, but I did tell myself, if I want to do this, I want to be the best and I want to win. And I think that those two things combined really helped me grow, right? So in my initial journey in 2019, just before I went pro, in my very first year, meddling with League of Legends, I remember, a lot of the pro scene would call me, a scammer, or they would say that that I didn't know what I was doing. And they were absolutely right? And I think the majority of people, their response in that position would be, no, I'm right, you're wrong, or something along the lines of that, or they would mute them or block them. But I went to them and I said, you know what, what made you say that, and what can I fix? And that wasn't because I wanted something from them. A lot of them ended up going to North America, actually. So I won't name names, but a lot of them ended up going to North America and having quite successful careers there. But, some of those tips was that starting journey, and that kind of accelerated. And I kept that mentality, throughout my journey as a coach, and even now. So those are the two main ones. How hungry are you? How desperate are you? And what are you willing to do? Right.
And I think that can carry over to any aspect in life, right? You already mentioned that this might not be your life calling, but if you can develop a toolkit, if you can develop the skills to excel at a craft, then that's a really good spot to be in your life regardless, right? Because I've had a history of success in tennis and then in gaming, which is obviously very different. I don't see myself as a tennis player. I don't see myself as a pro gamer. And dropping that ego, that's a huge part that, anyone listening to this wanting to improve in anything in their life, but, in League as well, in solo queue, dropping that ego, getting really curious about what you could be doing differently, and, isolating how you feel and what you should actually be working on and improving. So that's a great point that you bring up. So just before we move on from this one, I'm really curious about what your experience was like in the LEC, working with these big names and
Yeah.
Did you notice any major differences working with the big names, or like just cultural differences as well from your time in OSA or NA, or just give me a few insights on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think you would do very well as a professional coach. If I was in charge for a program, I would probably try hire you. I mean, I think I've said this to you before, right? Where I was like, if I get in that position, I kind of want to work with you in the future. And the reason for that is the culture in Europe, right? That was like the biggest shock for me. When I worked in North America, and I had that brief stint, there's some noise in the background.
There's construction. That's okay.
Okay, that's all right. There was, I mean, I felt a real lack in hunger in that region in general. Like from what I saw in scrims, what people were doing to improve, with exception to a few of the players that I had worked with, and in general, like there was a lot more, I would say, nepotism from what I saw in North America. I'm pretty openly critical about my experiences in that region, and the sharp contrast it had to European culture, which tends to be a bit more direct, which tends to be a bit more open to criticism, really gave me more motivation throughout my 6 months working in the French league. And actually, after Vitality and the lessons that I'd taken from those 6 months, I felt like I brought more to the team in the LEC than a lot of coaches that they've worked in the past, because I came to that league ready. Like my role was as assistant coach, but you could talk to any of the players, and I built the systems there, the way that we play. I built the way that we speak.
Sorry, and was this like in and out of game kind of
in
structures?
and out of game for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And they were really like kind of mind blown, right? They were like, wow. And so I just accelerated what I was already doing in the first 6 months of 2021 by going to Europe in the second half of 2021. And yeah, I mean, I guess the LEC was no different to working in the academy leagues, especially in a top league like France, like the LFL and the LVP. They have some really great players. I think the actual quality of players, the skill level of players, there is a big gap, but the actual process in which they improve it is the same for, I think, any kind of team and any kind of like player. Like the concept of specializing if you're not very good, or the concept of like solid fundamentals, or the way that you communicate, or the way that you play around the map. Some of these things just don't change. And so my experiences with LEC were actually just the same, like literally just the same. The only difference being specific details, like an increased breadth of details that you have to go into, like small edges that end up being a lot at the higher level, right? And that actually is the differentiator. If you have a really good system in the LEC, I truly believe with the right players, of course, top 3 is achievable, right? But then anything above that is the small details that you put in. And that's just mainly been my experience at Rogue.
Right.
Obviously, by the way, I think that coaching is a really humbling role. And something that every coach needs to remember is that we do this to like make the world a better place in a way. Like our job is all about the player, right? Our job is all about the player. And if the players are fundamentally way worse than that league, it's very hard to succeed, okay? So coaches are not an do-all, fix-all, right? If you have good players, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. You start off at a higher level to begin with. But I do think that because we had that level, I was able to accelerate our growth really, really quickly. And that's kind of what got me known. And that's kind of what people appreciated out of me when I went to the LEC.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned, so in terms of like the small details, having those important conversations, this is something that I've noticed. We had professional gaming houses when I was playing pro in 2017 and 2018. You're living with them. You can have those tough conversations in the moment. And then when I was still playing pro full time in 2021, it was remote. We couldn't really come together. We couldn't have those really tough convos. And whether that's, like a gaming house or being remote, or whether it's even a cultural difference, like you mentioned, maybe people in Europe are more comfortable having those tough conversations where you really need to, and that can make all the difference at the end of the day. So I'm not sure if you've thought of this too much, but North America does have success in some other esports, but in League, it feels like it's lagging behind a little bit. Do you have any kind of thoughts on why they might have success in first-person shooter games comparatively to League? If it's just a cultural thing, or if there's something else going on?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's look at FPS games. Through my case studies of FPS games, especially like CSGO, a lot of the successes that have come in North American organizations are teams like Cloud9, right? When, for example, Nothing used to play, I think that was his name, like Nothing with a zero. And then there was Shroud and Skadoodle. And like it was just that kind of roster. And there was also like an Evil Geniuses roster that did quite well. The main difference is that they play international tournaments. So they don't have an echo chamber of ideas and a set practice environment like some of the other esports titles do, specifically League of Legends. And so it helps negate a lot of the cultural issues and a lot of the issues behind the practice of the North American scene. But at the same time, my counter argument to the successes of the North American esports scene in other titles is that has there been a profound extended period of domination in these other titles? No. These titles are held by European teams, right? They're held by Na'Vi. They're held by Astralis, right? They're held by Karrigan. They're held by Ninjas in Pajamas in the Get Right days. So even in other esports titles, real domination at the highest league, top level domination is generally not in North America. And I actually don't think at this point this is a coincidence. Having worked there myself, having experienced the kind of culture I think I also got unlucky with the team that I went to, but having experienced the general culture and the attitude behind that region, there is an infestation of many egregious factors that prevent teams from succeeding, from like internal management issues to player motivation to overall practice environment to like ping. There's so many things wrong with that region,
right?
So I actually don't think it's just a League of Legends thing. I think that playing internationally helped them, but has there really been a dominant team for an extended period of time? I would always argue no.
Right.
And
okay.
Never be.
Yeah. No. So you brought up potentially how or the issues with the West excelling, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to dive in a little bit more to that. And so there are some common topics about why the West might be struggling to compete with the East, and one is culture. You mentioned ping as well. So just like geographically, it's hard to have good scrim partners if you're isolated. That's a big issue with Oceania as well. Are there any other like big factors in your mind for League other than like culture and ping, and obviously the infrastructure as well? I guess that would kind of cover most of it, right?
Yeah, I would say that covers the most of it. I think here's the problem, right? I think when we say the West, I think it's specifically North America. I know I'm heading a lot on North America here, right? And my boss, my head coach, Peter Dunn, worked in North America for many years. So he probably doesn't agree with everything that I say. Actually, maybe he does, but let's just assume he doesn't, okay? But the main thing is in Europe, ping really isn't an excuse in a lot of the countries. Like, for example, in Germany, I get 19 ping or less, right? So that might not be, the 3 ping that you get in Australia. Sorry, not Australia, but in Korea, but it's sufficient. And the player population, there's no problem behind the player population either. And in fact, if you really argued for infrastructure, I would say that European infrastructure is superior to a lot of the other infrastructures around the globe. For example, the extensive nature of the regional league system in Europe is incredibly healthy for developing talent. The French leagues pull more numbers in some of their matches than some of the LEC matches. That's how big it is. Same for the Spanish leagues, right? Because you have, YouTubers with, 10 million plus subscribers, like owning teams. So, and the salaries are incredibly competitive. And so you have this massive ecosystem in Europe. And then if you had to also talk about the successes of the region recently, I think that Europe has had a bit of a downturn,
Sure.
predominantly be due to like a lot of the talent being exported to other countries, as well as issues behind, I think, pay and teams trying to like find a more profitable way to run teams, right? Because some of the top names are absurd, the numbers that you have to pay for them, right? The players, sorry. But before that, FPX versus G2 in 2019, I think that G2 could have won that series. I think G2 could have been world champions. And I think, was it 2017, the Fnatic roster, they also made a world finals. So
versus IG, I think, right?
Versus IG. So like that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. I mean, player population is always going to be a problem in Europe because despite having a population of like 1 billion across the entirety of Europe,
right,
you really only have a few developed countries that actually play the game extensively, right? Like Germany, France, Spain, and then partly the UK, and then obviously like your Nordic regions.
Mm-hmm.
But compare that to Korea. I think Korea and China specifically, the pure number of players and talent that you can develop through an ecosystem is massive. And then there's obviously the cultural stuff. I mean, that I can't deny at all. Like
right.
if you're like a 20-year-old pro, Korean pro, and you have to go to the army in like 3 years, and you can make $1 million a year playing this video game,
right,
you're probably gonna play like your life depended on it.
right.
But these like esports pros in North America, they're just being chilling, smoking a joint,
Mm-hmm.
Streaming when they come home, playing different games and making $900K a year,
right,
$1 million a year. Like it's different. It's
the
for sure
culture
different.
is definitely.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just the culture, like the practice culture. It's just desperation, right? And so I actually think one of the main factors when you're building a team should be how hungry are they to actually win, and to find real hungry people, that's actually really hard to do.
And that could be
right.
Sure, yeah, and that could be a reason, like one of the factors why people who get, especially like the people who get imported into NA, they're moving across the country, across the globe. They're really like uprooting their lives, and that just like comes with a level of hunger initially, right? Where a lot of the potential local talent around there is just kind of being chilling, like you said.
Yeah.
So one more on how the West or NA potentially could excel. This is a narrative that I've heard a lot. Now I'm not sure if it's necessarily mainstream or if it was more through my professional days, but you don't want to like replicate other regions. You want to find your own niche and potentially be creative. And what are your takes on that?
Yeah, no, I really agree. I think that, I mean, this is something that I've said at Rogue and I've said at Heretics as well. And I think most good coaches think the same. I think every good coach thinks the same way, actually. Your team needs to have your specific colors and the way that you want to play and your own play style. You can't replicate another person's play style because that play style, that team style derives from 5 individual different members that have found a solution on their own in a very competitive environment. So you need to play your style. And the big trap is they go to these international tournaments and they just play catch up. Right. And so, how can we kind of avoid, how can we, be in a position where we play our own style, but also not be too far behind the meta? Well, in that's a different conversation altogether.
Right.
But I mean, I completely agree. You should have your own color, right?
Awesome. Team. Yeah. So we're going to jump back a little bit, and you briefly mentioned this. In terms of like a coach's role, I think you mentioned that the coach's role is all about the player, and I just want to dive into that a little bit more. So maybe this would be different for coaching a pro team versus coaching, individual clients that play solo queue. But the way that I understand a coach's role is like in a more general sense, like bringing order to chaos, like bringing a form of structure so that the game doesn't look as scary. The game is very complex. There's so many variables. And if you can provide some framework for people to, just to be able to stand on and help them support some of their weight so that they can, slowly understand the game more and operate more in the world of order, Does that resonate with you at all? And would you make any, big, would you notice any big differences between coaching pro and coaching individual clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the difference between coaching a professional and a client, well, there's two actually primary differences. One is League of Legends is a team game when you play professionally. League of Legends, when you play casually as a solo queue player, is not a team game. This is actually like really counterintuitive, but if you want to coach a pro team and if you want to play as a professional, you actually need to blame your teammates sometimes. If you try to find your own solutions, a lot of the time they'll just be suboptimal, right? Because you need to be 5 different units moving in the same way, thinking the same way, acting toward the same goal, playing towards your team composition. In solo queue, you can play whatever you want, right? You can just run around and you just have to adapt. If your jungler is top for no reason when your bot lane is getting dove, you just have to leave the tower. And because the only consistent factor is yourself, the coaching style and the mindset is completely different, right?
Yeah.
You're playing something closer to an MMORPG, even though it's a multiplayer game, a really, really, really hard MMORPG. It's like playing Elden Ring, but like,
right. Yeah.
top-down version in a way, because your teammates are running it down. You're playing an ultra difficulty. And then the second thing is, I think that as a professional player, you cannot have the mindset of someone competing under non-stressful conditions. Obviously, this depends on the person. This depends on if you have, mental struggles when it comes to the game, not just tilt, but specifically, stress, anxiety, pressure, a lot on the line. Because in solo queue, you can just queue up and play again, right? Ranked anxiety is actually pretty rare. It's not a common thing. A lot of people can just play 10 games a day if they really wanted to. But in the professional scene, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot on the line, because if you don't perform, you might not have a job.
Sure.
Yeah. And going back to that point about uprooting your life, if I fuck up and I don't do a good job in Europe, I have to fly home for 30 hours. And I have an apartment here. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
And your sense of livelihood can disappear. And it is a performance-based industry. You simply need to perform. The top earners are always people that perform. And if you perform, orgs make money. And if orgs make money, you make more money, right?
Right.
And then there's the fan pressure and the fact that you're being broadcast in front of hundreds of thousands of people. It's different. So you need to have an athlete's mindset. So performance coaching sports psychology plays a much bigger role in professional League of Legends than casual League of Legends. Although I think it's applicable to both.
Yeah. So you mentioned pressure and rising to the occasion, but you can also like crumble under the pressure. And so I wanted to explore this a little bit more. If we could find a way for, the more casual solo queue player to, employ this sense of urgency and pressure to help them perform. But I've also had a lot of students myself that feel like that amount of pressure would be detrimental and they would just stop having fun and they would just crumble under it. And so then would you potentially like adjust how you approach, coaching and the idea of pressure with different people's personalities, or would you just really kind of emphasize rising to the occasion and embracing pressure, or what do you think?
No, that's exactly what I mean, actually. I think that when you're coaching non-professionals, the pressure aspect should not be like the focal point of your practice. It's a completely different game. I actually think that the amount of effort it takes to change your mindset to be an athlete's mindset, and by athlete's mindset, I mean a person that can perform under pressure. That's not a normal person, right? A normal human being is not built to withstand that kind of pressure.
Do you think you could learn how to?
That's exactly what you need to do. And that's one of the biggest factors behind many esports players' downfalls. A lot of these esports orgs hire kids and they expect these guys to be treated as kids and to be able to perform on stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people with millions of dollars on the line.
Right.
That's just not possible. No sport has that. And no esport is like that. That's why performance coaching, I think, is an integral part of being a professional coach. And so we have a lot of emphasis on process-driven mindset and how to perform under pressure and what they can do. We have a sports psychologist working full-time for us.
Yeah.
And at least in our league, right? Depends on the level and depends on the resources that you have. But in the casual sense, in the casual game, what's important is, I mean, the process side is good, but a lot of in-game stuff. And how do you enjoy yourself, but enjoy yourself while focusing on things that are relevant and important. So for example, if the game is chaotic, just calming down, taking a deep breath and thinking about the win condition, that's something that's applicable to both, in-game, professional League of Legends and out of game, casual League of Legends. But essentially, the casual side would focus way more on that than the other side, right?
Sure.
Because you can't play the same. You actually can't play the same when you're going out there.
Right, definitely. Oh, that's a good point. I got inspired to ask a question. I can't remember what inspired it, but I wanted to talk about the value of solo queue in your mind. And so when I was playing professionally, especially in 2018, I was absolutely mentally exhausted after 2-3 blocks of scrims. I would try really, really hard in the draft and in game and in review. It was me and Sharonfire that were kind of leading the review a lot. And then afterwards, I was just so mentally exhausted. I just wanted to chill out, play some Fortnite with the friends and just, switch off. And I understand that, different perspectives that could arise from that. But there's also a lot of critique on solo queue in general, especially in Oceania and North America that I'm aware of the value of solo queue. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because you said that, for the average solo queue player, that's all about what is in your responsibility. You want to take all of the responsibility. You're not part of a team. You're the only consistent factor. And then in professional play, that's not how you want to approach it. You want to get on the same team. You want to gel with everyone. So do you think, what is the value of solo queue for pro players?
Well, actually, you were a player that didn't play much solo queue from my understanding. Okay, so solo queue is important. Solo queue is for sure important for a professional player. But the reason is not what you expect it to be. Solo queue, like to climb in solo queue and to get better at solo queue, those skill sets are not relevant to esports or like professional League of Legends at all. The game is completely different. Whatever region you go to, maybe it's a bit better in Europe, but the game just doesn't look anything like your scrims. What solo queue is important for is the fact that this game is ever so changing. The patch changes so often. And so getting ahead of the meta is actually a huge edge as a professional player. And so the point of solo queue for me is, one, understanding the meta faster than other people by just playing more games in that current patch and finding advantages through the draft, right? And two, just practicing your mechanics. Someone that plays more solo queue is just mechanically going to be more proficient. You were a weird case because you would just go out there and you would absorb all the pressure. You just take it all in and you just play like a fucking machine when you're on stage, which was really unique. And I think that came from your professional sports background. But what kind of, and you were mechanically good too. That's the crazy part. But what kind of, I think, maybe held you back as a professional was finding the edges in the other areas. You were actually really good with routine as well, I remember, right? But like finding that those unique picks and expanding your champion pool and testing champs. And I think the primary reason that happened to you, for example, and it was that you cared. Okay, in Oceania, you just never got good coaches. And so the players had to coach themselves. So someone had to care about how the team played. So you spent that entire time, even 3 games, focusing on all of your teammates' movements, every single thing that they need to do, and play the game at the same time. That's fucking hard to do. As a professional player, what you should be doing is you should come in with 2 or 3 goals that you want to work on and just focus on your own play and focus on being a part of a bigger machine, being a small part of a bigger machine, being a cog. And that is not mentally exhausting as you would think. But you had to coach the entire team, hence the burnout, right? And so I actually think that you, along with a couple other players in the Oceanic region, could have become, one of the greats in other regions as well, had you had taken that path. But you never really had that guidance from my understanding, right? And so it's just so mentally exhausting to pay attention to every little piece. Whereas as a support, for example, I'd be like, just if I can't get mid prior, I want to play through side. So in this scrim set, I want to focus on playing through side and being on tempo and making sure I have vision control and X, Y, Z, Z timers. 10 times better than fucking my AD carry is not here and my top lane. Why is he pushing? Why is he going bot? They don't know. And that's the rough part about being a player in Oceania, I think. It's so hard.
Interesting, yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up that point about me potentially finding other picks, because I'm noticing those weaknesses in my coaching as well. I don't really study other regions, other pro games as in depth, or like solo queue. I was never really heavily engaged in the scene, on Reddit and Twitter and getting heaps of conversations going. I was more so like sticking to my own thing. And then, for coaching as well, if I'm doing, or even for my YouTube, if I'm doing a guide on a champion, it's like I want it to come from myself, from my own experiences and my perspective. But then I know I'm missing out on so many other perspectives at the same time. And so then
I also think it's the resources too, right? You don't look at Reddit. You look at ProView. You look at, but all this is not your job as a player. And that's why I'm kind of sad in your case, actually. You're one of the few players that I'm really sad about, because despite being like older, I think if we had met and I had started in this industry a few years earlier and I had the same knowledge, I could see you being in North America in one of the top teams. That's the sad part, because you're an OPL champion. You're known as one of the best supports in our region. And you did that all through instinct. And it was kind of uncanny that despite me breaking things down methodically, you had a very good instinctual feel on how the game should be played. And then only when we discuss systems, you're like, oh, so this is why when I do this, it works, right? But imagine you had a couple of years, to develop that. And so, maybe it ended up for the better that you go into coaching and do content, but that's kind of how I feel about you and that topic.
Right. Yeah. We never know where other paths in life could have left us, but I'm confident for both of us that, our approach to improvement and staying self-critical and excelling in the field is going to work out for both of us. But I really did, I enjoyed our time working together, and I was like heavily inspired. So that would have been fun to go further on that path. But okay, so I think we have just a couple more points to talk about. I wanted to get a few, common hot topics. And so we've already talked a little bit about how the West could potentially perform a little bit better, specifically NA. What are your thoughts on a coach's rank? There's a lot of talk about a coach should be XYZ, and you've talked about how valuable it is to be an ex-pro. So do you have like any baseline kind of rank for coaches, or do you think they just need to do more of their own research to make up for lack of experience?
The higher the rank, the better. Just that feel that you have for the game, damage numbers, just that feel of like timing in general, being able to lead the team in that sense is so beneficial. And that's kind of something I wish I had more of. I think that I'm quite decent, actually. I think I'm actually better than a lot of people, but that comes from me playing the game as well. But had I been, like a challenger player, I picked Diamond 1 in Oceania, and I was Diamond 2 in Korea. Had I had peaked higher, and if I had picked up the game earlier, I really think that part of the analysis when it came down to lane, feel for things, clicks, team fighting, that would have been so beneficial. And that's one of the many reasons they said that this industry will be replaced by ex-pros, because they just have that huge edge before anything starts. Do I think it's absolutely necessary? It depends on your role. If you're a positional coach, yes. Yes. If you're low, you should not be a positional coach, I think. And by low, I mean anything below Diamond 1, I think is not, you're not going to bring much value there. Ideally, you're challenger or grandmaster. And then if you're a performance coach, of course not. I mean, you just need to be, you just need to have a degree in sports science. You need to have, you need to know things about physical therapy, about exercise, about performance. If you're a head coach, it helps, but it's not necessary as well. Depends on your role. I think that the coaching ecosystem in a professional team is a sum of many pieces. It's kind of like a 1+1 = 3 game, where you try to find the right pieces to find the best efficiency, best kind of combination. So like one guy might be really good with people, really good at delegating, really good instinct when it comes to talent scouting. Then you have another guy that would be a strategic coach. And that's kind of like what my role was at Rogue, where I had a plethora of like skills, but I played more of a strategic coach role in that team than assistant coach. I mean, we didn't even have a strategic coach, so that kind of explains it, right? And you can see that in the way that we play. Between 2021 and 2022, we play a completely different style of game. I mean, a lot of that credit goes to the players too, right? But that's kind of my view. And rank is super important.
Is the rank something that you feel like you personally should invest time into to try and get challenger, to either be a better coach or for any reason like that?
I mean, if you want to be a pro coach, yes. I mean, it's just a huge tick in my when I scout for coaches, when I try to look for talent,
right.
Yes.
But for yourself, like, do you want to try and push for challenger yourself?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do. I mean, I have really bad discipline actually when it comes to solo queue. I play way too many. I play all roles. I play too many champions.
Right.
I have bad hands, and I'm just very undisciplined inside the game. And so that is something that I strive to do. But at this stage in my career, it's not my utmost priority, right? It was when I was starting out in 2020 and 2019. I think I played 4,000 games. I played every role.
Yeah.
I studied every role. I played every champion. I was playing Lee Sin with like 10 APM. I'm like, I'm like clicking once every 10 seconds, and I'm playing Lee Sin to just try to figure this thing out. I'm watching Chinese combos and seeing how it works, and like trying to study the timings, like so that I understand when he can go for this kind of kick or this kind of angle or this kind of fight. Yeah, there isn't a champion I haven't played.
Yeah, and in order to make your climb as smooth as possible, it sounds like we're already on the same page in terms of playing one role, keeping your champ pool small, making sure you understand.
You don't do what I do, but I mean, to be honest, at some point, I think I kind of realized this is not what I need to do. I just need to study like champs.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like I think in 2020, I was duo boosted. I was like just duo queuing with like a grandmaster player permanently, and I was only like Kai Diamond.
Right.
But I focused on playing a bunch of different champs, much to his dismay. I think he's a pro player now, actually.
There you go.
So,
okay, I think so. We've got maybe one more that I wanted to talk to you about, and so I know you've had some hardship in your life, and I wanted to get your take on your biggest challenges in your journey so far. And I know that your personality and your experiences have shaped you, and your hunger, your determination to be the best is really pushing you through. And that's why I know you're going to, have consistent success. And so, what are your take on like the biggest challenges and maybe how they have influenced you and your takes?
I mean, I think my initial biggest challenge was outside of esports. I grew up in a pretty rough family. And then, when I was 7, I mean, Thorin was talking about it on his show, how I was homeless when I got into esports, but that's not the case at all. I was homeless coming out of high school. That was 6 years before I even, got into esports, and before that, my upbringing, I went to a really rough school. I had a really rough childhood. And, I worked multiple different jobs. I was kitchen hand, cleaner, removalist, fucking everything. I tried everything. Worked in cafes, worked in restaurants, and I think that was like the bigger challenges, like growing up. And then the other one was just that sense of doubt. I think for me, I have confidence that whatever industry that I work in, I will find success because I have very solid values that I believe in, to do good by the world, So, for example, when I'm doing my startup thing, to do good by the world, to generate a product that is good for the consumer. And two, so to do the right thing, right? And two, to learn fast and to just, drop the ego, drop the pride. Because it It is so useless. And so that's actually those were my biggest like challenges in esports. Like it's, even though I tell myself that, everyone else was telling me that I wouldn't make it in esports. You know, my own family was telling me that I was delusional after my direwolf stint, because I mean, I don't know if you remember, they weren't paying people on time. That was like a really
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was still looking for a job in Europe. And so I had my back against the wall at the time, and people were just like, you need to drop this. You're delusional. You're lost. Those kind of times were really rough as well. Right.
And you either rise to the occasion or crumble. Right.
Yeah. But I mean, my experiences in my younger days kind of told me to believe in myself and to just keep going. And I just YOLO'd it, which is, I think, only really possible in hindsight because I'm young. Right. Had I been 35 with kids, I don't think I could have done that. So I'm glad that I had that mindset since I was young, you know, and I just pushed through.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is the best analogy for me to make because I don't have much knowledge on the topic, but I have heard of, you know, professional fighters, be it boxers or, you know, MMA athletes who come from nothing and they have to perform or they're going to have nothing. And this is their only way to find success, to find meaning. And it sounds like you had a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I was motivated by money like these guys.
Right.
I mean, Pacquiao was that exact example, right? One of the greatest fighters in our generation. For me, it was more a pursuit of happiness growing up, as sad as it sounds. It was like finding meaning in what made me happy. And what made me happy was bringing value to people and making the world a better place. And coaching is just a small step in my journey towards achieving that, right? Making the players perform and achieve their dreams and help them achieve their dreams.
Definitely. Awesome. This has been really insightful, SeeEl. Is there any other things that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
No, it's all good. I mean, maybe a little bit about my startup.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So, just what you're working on the side and anything for people to reach you.
So we're incorporated in Delaware. It's a coaching startup, and something I've noticed is that aside from people like you, most coaches work on a sales as a service site, something like Medify, and this is like really egregious to like, this is just both damaging to both the coach and the consumer because of two things. One, there's no quality control, right? There's no like evidence to show that this guy's a great coach. You could be a great player, but a bad coach. And so you're just kind of hoping that the reviews, you know, stand the test of time or stand for what they mean. And you buy the coaching session, you could be disappointed, you could be, you know, amazed. And the second is commission. The sales and service sites like Medify take commission per hour. And so we're really targeting these two things. We're going to run online classrooms for each role on a subscription-based program, and it's going to cost you $2.50 to $4 now. That's kind of what we're aiming to do. And unlike other coaching sessions, we want to train our own coaches, and we want to create a curriculum for esports and expand towards developing a product that consumers find a lot of value in. So that's kind of what we're trying to do at Parabled. And the website's a bit scuffed, doing everything by hand. Basically, I'm running all the things, but we tested 200 users in February. It's free to test this month. And those subscription programs will go out in March. And I'll have some certified coaches, one of them being one of the main coaches for Cloud9 Training Grounds, the guy that ran that. So, you'll get value, and we want to make sure that people get value, people aren't overcharged, and that, it's well accredited, right? So that's kind of what we're doing. So, keep stay tuned for that stuff. Yeah. Obviously, it helped massively if people followed the Twitter, the Parabled Inc. Twitter, because we made that not too long ago. And maybe I might reach out to you to do some sort of partnership. We'll see.
Sure. And I'll drop all of the relevant links in the description below.
Yeah.
I think it's really transparent that you're going to have excellent systems, and you're a really driven, motivated, good guy. So,
Well, and I'm not going to take a salary. Not going to take anything at the moment. Everything is going to be reinvested into the business, into training coaches. So that's kind of the goal right now.
there you go. Definitely check that out. I'm sure it'll work out for you. I have full confidence in your skills as a person, and everything else that it'll go well. So definitely give that a click. And it's been really fun. I always enjoy talking to you. I always like being reminded of what being a really driven person and talented and smart, and like where it can take you. So it's always a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks for being on my channel. And yeah, I'll see you guys around.
Much appreciated, Andy.
Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. Big thank you to all of my patrons over here. I really couldn't do this without you. The links for coaching, for Patreon, for my School of Support Discord server, for socials, they're all going to be linked in the description below. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. I am streaming 5 days a week now at twitch.tv/cupcakeoce. Come say hi, I would love to see you there.